The distress signal. The deep space monitoring station floated in the darkness, silent and undisturbed. It was one of many that the Galactic Council had placed across the outer regions, machines built to listen, to scan, to warn. For years, these stations had picked up nothing but routine signals, the hum of normal space traffic. But tonight was different. A single red light flashed on the control panel. A distress signal. Commander Yulan, auxiliary officer with over a century of experience, narrowed his reptilian eyes at the blinking alert. He moved quickly, activating the scanners, decrypting the signal, and bringing it up on the main screen. The audio was distorted, the message fractured, but the fear in the voice was unmistakable. Emergency. This is Colony 512. They're here. We need reinforcements. We need. Static. A brief silence. Then another voice, weaker, desperate. They are coming. We tried to stop them, but they won't listen. We can't reason with them. Gods help us. Another burst of static. Then nothing. The message ended abruptly, and the station fell silent once more. Yulan felt his two hearts pounding. Colony 512 was in the outer rim, near the border of Deathworlder space, and whoever had sent that message had been speaking about them. The Deathworlders. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within the hour. The distress signal had already been analyzed, but no one could make sense of it. No known enemy had attacked. There were no signs of invasion. The only clue, a fleet, massive, unstoppable, had launched from the Deathworlder home system. 10,000 warships, moving with terrifying precision. No official communication, no warnings, just a single, relentless march forward. The council chamber buzzed with terrified whispers as the representatives of 100 species debated. The Deathworlders are mobilizing for war. One counselor shouted. We must respond immediately. They have always been a threat. This proves it. They are heading towards us. We must act before it's too late. But Grand Chancellor Vorax, an elder of the Telethar species, raised a clawed hand for silence. His many eyes gleamed as he spoke. Has anyone spoken to the Deathworlders? He asked coldly. Has anyone asked them why they are moving? The chamber fell into uneasy silence. No one had. No one dared to. The Deathworlders were a species unlike any other, dangerous, unpredictable, survivors of a homeworld so harsh that only the strongest of their kind ever made it to adulthood. The council had always kept them at a distance, fearing what they might do if provoked. And now, without warning, they were coming. But were they coming for the council, or from something else? Desperate for answers, the council deployed a scout ship to intercept the fleet. The vessel, the Silver Wind, was small, fast, and equipped with advanced stealth technology. If anyone could get close enough to see what was happening, it was them. For hours, the council waited, tracking the Silver Wind as it approached the Deathworlder Armada. Then, suddenly, the signal vanished. One moment, the ship was there. The next, it was gone. No explosion, no distress call, no wreckage. Just silence. The council chamber froze as the final telemetry came through. Before the Silver Wind had disappeared, its last scan had detected something else. Something behind the Deathworlder fleet. Something massive. Something moving in the dark. For the first time in history, the Galactic Council was afraid. The Deathworlders were feared, yes, but they were also predictable. They fought for survival, for honor, for revenge. But they never moved without reason. And yet, here they were, moving at full speed, without stopping, without explaining. What were they running from? And more importantly, would it reach the Council next? The Galactic Council had always viewed the Deathworlders as unpredictable, dangerous, and best left alone. For centuries, they had been tolerated, watched from afar, but never truly accepted. Their homeworld, Earth, was a place of extremes, deadly storms, unstable tectonic plates, brutal winters, and blistering summers. Life on such a world forged them into something different, something unstoppable. Yet despite their reputation, the Deathworlders had never openly attacked the Council or any of its member species. They fought only when provoked, only when survival demanded it. Their wars were brutal, but they always had reasons. That was why the current situation was so terrifying. A fleet of 10,000 warships moving in formation, heading straight toward the heart of Council space, without a word. No warnings, no demands, no ultimatums. The Deathworlders had simply mobilized and started moving. And wherever they passed, the only thing left behind was silence. The destruction of the Silver Wind had only deepened the mystery. The scout ship had approached the Deathworlder fleet, cloaked and undetected. But then, in the blink of an eye, it had vanished. No explosion, no trace, just gone. It was as if something had swallowed it whole. Now the Council was in chaos. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed this was the beginning of an invasion, that the Deathworlders had finally decided to conquer the galaxy. Others were convinced they had developed some new weapon, something that could erase ships from existence without leaving debris. A few, only a few, whispered that maybe, just maybe, the Deathworlders weren't coming for the Council at all. Grand Chancellor Vorex sat at the center of the storm, listening as representatives screamed over each other, demanding action. Some wanted to preemptively strike the Deathworlder fleet, to wipe them out before they could reach Council space. Others urged caution, fearing what retaliation might come if the Deathworlders were truly provoked. A decision had to be made. The fleet was approaching fast, and time was running out. Vorex raised his voice, silencing the chamber. "We have always feared the Deathworlders," he said, his many eyes scanning the gathered leaders, "and perhaps with good reason. But this is not their way. If they wanted war, we would have heard their battle cry." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "So I ask you all, what if they are running from something? And what if that something is coming for us next?" The room fell into stunned silence. For the first time since the meeting had begun, the counselors stopped arguing and truly thought about the situation. If the Deathworlders were fleeing, what could possibly be chasing them? And what if, by treating them as enemies, the Council was making the biggest mistake in galactic history? Somewhere beyond the Council chambers, the Deathworlder fleet continued its relentless march forward. Silent, unstoppable. And just behind them, in the cold void of space, something else stirred. The Deathworlder fleet continued its relentless march through space, an unstoppable force moving with precision and purpose. 10,000 warships, each bristling with weapons, each built to survive the harshest conditions known to the galaxy. They traveled in eerie silence, transmitting no messages, ignoring all hails. The Galactic Council's surveillance stations, scattered along the outer rim of civilized space, had been tracking the fleet for days. Every attempt at contact had been met with the same chilling response. Nothing. No threats, no warnings, no demands. Just silence. And then, one by one, the stations began to go dark. At first, it was dismissed as a malfunction. The outermost post, Station Ardent, stopped transmitting. The Council sent a scout ship to investigate. It never returned. Then Outpost 12 vanished. Then Listening Post Vega 6. Panic spread like wildfire through the Council. The Deathworlders were known for their brutal efficiency in war. If they had turned against the galaxy, there would be no time to prepare. Some worlds immediately activated planetary shields. Others scrambled to send evacuation ships away from potential battle zones. Armies were mobilized, defenses strengthened. But Grand Chancellor Vorex was troubled by something else. The timing. The way the Deathworlder fleet was moving. This wasn't an invasion. This was something else. In the Council's war chambers, analysts pored over the fleet's movements. Patterns began to emerge. Strange, chilling patterns. One analyst, a auxiliary named Jorvix, pieced it together first. His multiple arms trembled as he displayed the data on the central holographic table. "They're avoiding certain systems," he whispered, voice filled with dread. "Not attacking. Avoiding." The counselors leaned in, eyes widening as the realization set in. "They aren't hunting," another analyst murmured. "They're running." A cold silence settled over the chamber. For centuries, the Deathworlders had been feared. They were warriors, survivors, conquerors when necessary. But never before had they fled. Never before had they abandoned territory and ignored the rest of the galaxy. If they were running, then the question was terrifyingly simple. What could possibly make the Deathworlders afraid? Vorax turned to the lead intelligence officer. "Send a message," he ordered, "to the Deathworlder fleet. Tell them we request an audience." The officer hesitated. "And if they refuse?" Vorax's many eyes darkened. "Then we pray to the stars that they are not running from something that will reach us next." The Galactic Council's emergency session was in chaos. Fears spread through the chamber like a plague as the gathered representatives from countless species tried to make sense of the unfolding crisis. The Deathworlder fleet minus 10,000 warships strong was not on the attack. They were fleeing. And yet, they refused to communicate. Grand Chancellor Vorax stood at the center of the chamber, his clawed hands resting on the stone podium. "We must establish contact," he growled, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "If the Deathworlders are running, we must know why." Auxiliary Ambassador, his bioluminescent tendrils flickering with anxiety, gestured wildly. "We should be preparing our own escape. If the humans, are abandoning their colonies, then whatever they are running from is something we cannot hope to fight." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Deathworlders were notorious for their resilience, their ability to fight against impossible odds. If they had encountered something that even they could not stand against, then the rest of the galaxy had no hope. But not everyone was convinced. "They are a war-hardened species," a reptilian Dervuk commander hissed. "Perhaps this is a deception, a strategy to lure us into lowering our defenses." His slitted eyes narrowed. They could be planning something. A loud chime interrupted the debate, drawing every eye to the massive central display. A transmission had just been received. A message from a Deathworlder vessel. It was the first communication from the humans in over a week. With a trembling claw, Vorax gestured for the message to be played. A holographic projection flickered to life. A human officer stood before them, clad in a dark combat uniform. His face was pale, his expression grim. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Do not follow us." A stunned silence filled the chamber. The message repeated, the human's face unchanged. "Do not follow us." Vorax stepped forward. "Respond to them," he ordered. The communications officer hurried to send a reply. "This is the Galactic Council," he transmitted. "We need to know. What is happening? Why are you fleeing?" There was a long pause. Then a new message came through. The human officer's face appeared once more, this time with a single sentence that sent a chill through every soul present. "If we told you, you wouldn't be able to sleep at night." The transmission cut off. The chamber was silent. Then, for the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt something they had never associated with the humans before. Pure, unrelenting terror. Panic spread like wildfire across the Galactic Council. The humans' chilling words echoed in the minds of every representative present. "If we told you, you wouldn't be able to sleep at night." What could possibly frighten them? The Deathworlders. Grand Chancellor Vorax's hands trembled as he gripped the edges of his podium. "We must uncover the truth," he declared, his voice firm despite the fear gnawing at him. "Prepare a diplomatic fleet. We will find the humans and demand answers." The chamber erupted into chaos. Some species, like the Xilari, outright refused. "You heard them. They warned us to stay away. If even the humans fear what's coming, then we should be running now." Others, like the war-hardened Dervuk, disagreed. "Cordis will not save us," their commander growled. We must know our enemy before we decide how to respond. But one voice rose above the rest, a voice filled with barely contained dread. It was the Ithari Prime Speaker, a member of an ancient, telepathic race. Their species had long prided itself on sensing emotions even across vast distances. And what they sensed now was beyond horrifying. "I have reached out," the Ithari whispered. "I have touched the minds of the fleeing humans." The chamber fell silent. "What did you see?" Vorax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The Ithari shuddered, their 3 eyes wide with terror. "I saw nothing," they said. "Their minds are voids. They are not simply afraid. They have shut down. There is only one time I have ever witnessed such a thing." The chamber waited. The Ithari's next words sent a ripple of dread through the council. "I have only seen such fear in species that are already doomed." A heavy silence fell. Then, for the first time in the council's history, even the most warlike species hesitated. Something was coming. And if the humans, Deathworlders, conquerors, survivors of 1,000 wars, believed it was unstoppable, then perhaps, for the first time in history, the entire galaxy was already lost. The Galactic Council's diplomatic fleet had set off in search of the humans, determined to uncover the truth. 20 heavily armed vessels, carrying the most powerful diplomats, warriors, and scholars from across the galaxy, traveled through the void toward the last known coordinates of humanity's presence. But as they entered the Sol system, they were met with an eerie silence. Earth was still there, floating in the endless black, but it was wrong. The planet, once a beacon of activity, now looked abandoned. No orbital traffic, no signals, no response to hails. The vast network of human satellites, space stations, and relay beacons was still intact, yet everything was dark. It was as if Earth had simply stopped. Grand Chancellor Vorax stood at the command deck of the lead ship, his claws gripping the rail tightly. "This is impossible," he muttered. "The humans don't just vanish." Auxiliary scientists ran their tendrils over a control panel, scanning the surface of Earth. There are structures, cities, even power grids still active, but no signs of life, no transmissions, no movement. "Are they hiding?" one of the Dervok warriors asked, his deep voice filled with suspicion. Before anyone could respond, an alert flashed across the screens. A single signal, a distress beacon, weak and flickering, barely pushing through the dead silence of the system. "This signal," the Ithari telepath murmured, their elongated fingers trembling over the controls. "It is coming from a small station orbiting Titan." The fleet turned and made their way toward the source. As they approached, they finally saw it, a lone human vessel, drifting near the methane-covered moon. The ship bore the markings of the United Earth Defense Force, but its hull was scared, its lights flickering. And then, without warning, the ship's systems activated. A single transmission came through, weak and distorted. "Don't land on Earth. Don't send anyone. Just leave. There's nothing left. And if you're hearing this," a pause, "you might already be too late." A cold dread settled over the council members. The humans were not just missing. They were running from something. And whatever had made them run, whatever had emptied their homeworld, was still out there. The Galactic Council's fleet drifted in stunned silence. The distress message from the lone human ship had sent shockwaves through the highest ranks of the Council. Every species aboard the diplomatic fleet felt the same creeping realization. Something had happened to humanity, something so terrifying that even the mighty Deathworlders had abandoned their own home. But why? The lead ship cautiously approached the damaged human vessel near Titan. Automated docking sequences engage, and a small team of heavily armed specialists prepared to board. The council members watched from their command deck, anxious and afraid. The boarding party entered the ship. Inside, flickering emergency lights barely illuminated the narrow corridors. The air was stale, the smell of burnt circuits and old sweat filling their nostrils. The team moved forward, weapons raised, scanning every shadow. And then they found them. 3 human survivors, gaunt, exhausted, their uniforms torn, their weapons clutched tightly, as if even in their sleep they couldn't afford to lower their guard. One of them stirred, a woman with hollow eyes that had clearly seen too much. When she saw the alien figures surrounding her, she tensed, but exhaustion kept her from reaching for her gun. Who? Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. The Etheri telepath stepped forward, speaking in a gentle tone. "We are from the Galactic Council. We received your distress signal. What happened here?" The woman let out a weak laugh, one without humor, without joy. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. "What do you mean?" the telepath pressed. The woman took a deep, shuddering breath. Then, with a voice filled with a quiet, terrible certainty, she spoke the words that would haunt the Galactic Council for eternity. "We weren't the ones running. Earth wasn't abandoned. We left it behind because we had no choice. Something woke up. Something we thought we buried long ago. And we barely escaped." A long silence followed. Then the ship's emergency lights flickered, and a new signal pinged on the fleet's sensors. Something was coming. Something from Earth. And it was not human.